Imagine this: a company so groundbreaking, so forward thinking, that people started calling it the most innovative business in America. A Houston based energy giant, it promised to reshape the way energy flowed across the globe, turning something as complex as gas and electricity into a market as accessible as buying and selling stock. Enron seemed like a beacon of American success, a titan riding the wave of the booming late 1990s economy. Investors couldn't buy in fast enough, watching Enron's stock shoot up as though nothing could touch it. From the outside, it was unstoppable, a company that turned big promises into even bigger profits. Or so it seemed. But under that sparkling surface, hidden from prying eyes, cracks were already starting to form. Behind the scenes, something darker was brewing. What happens next? What secrets could bring down an empire this big? To understand the full story, we need to go back to the beginning and peel away the layers of deception one by one. In every empire, there are architects, visionaries who shape the foundation and mold the vision. At Enron, that was Ken Lay, the charismatic founder. Lay had the trust of his employees, the confidence of investors, and a powerful network of political connections. To the public, he embodied respectability and success, a leader driven to make Enron a world leader in energy. But Lay wasn't alone in steering Enron's future. He brought in Jeffrey Skilling, a man who would come to define Enron's risky philosophy. Skilling had a sharp mind for finance and an even sharper hunger for growth. He convinced Lay and others that to stay ahead, Enron needed to embrace an aggressive strategy, a complex, daring way of accounting that could instantly turn hypothetical profits into real gains on paper. Skilling wasn't just creating wealth, he was creating an illusion of boundless prosperity. And then there was Andrew Fastow, Enron's CFO and Skilling's financial engineer. Fastow's genius lay in crafting intricate financial structures that buried Enron's debts in off the books entities. These special purpose entities hid the reality of Enron's financial troubles from the world, creating a smokescreen of profitability. To investors and the public, Enron seemed unstoppable, with no hint of the precarious balance beneath. Together, these three masterminds crafted a vision of endless growth, but as we'll see, their ambition would soon become their undoing. Their plans were bold, but were they sustainable? And what would happen when the facade began to crack? To the outside world, Enron's profits looked unstoppable, but beneath that success lay a risky game of illusions. As the company rapidly expanded, so did the pressure to deliver bigger and better numbers to Wall Street. And Enron's answer to this pressure, an accounting method that blurred the lines between actual profit and pure speculation, mark-to-market accounting. Unlike traditional accounting, where revenue is recorded when cash is in hand, mark-to-market allowed Enron to claim profits based on projected future gains from contracts earnings that didn't yet exist. For every new project or deal, Enron could essentially predict its profits upfront, instantly inflating revenue without waiting to see if those numbers would ever materialize. Under Skilling's vision, this tactic turned hypothetical success into immediate earnings, painting a picture of astronomical growth. It was a magician's trick, where the illusion of endless wealth captivated investors and analysts alike. But cracks were already forming in this strategy. Enron's projections didn't always come true, and when they didn't, there was no actual cash to cover the gaps. The company was walking a tightrope of speculation, and only those at the very top could see the depth of the deception. How long could Enron keep up the act before someone noticed? Or was the illusion simply too compelling to question? As the stakes grew, so did the risks, and the fall was only a matter of time. In 2001, as Enron's shadowy practices continued to escalate, someone inside the company saw through the glittering facade. Sharon Watkins, a vice president and longtime Enron employee, began piecing together a troubling pattern: profits on paper, but little real cash flow, complex financial dealings that didn't quite add up, and an almost fanatical commitment to market accounting. Watkins wasn't an outsider; she had spent years within Enron's ranks. But when she examined the numbers closely, alarm bells started ringing. Watkins took the bold step of writing directly to Ken Lay, warning of impending disaster. Her letter was direct and damning, calling Enron a house of cards built on unreliable accounting. She feared that the company was teetering on the edge of implosion if its hidden debts were exposed. However, Lay's response was unnervingly calm. While he assured her he would look into her claims, the reality was that her letter barely stirred the waters on the executive floor. Yet, Watkins' warning marked a turning point. She had spoken up against a company that prided itself on secrecy, challenging its culture from within. It was the first crack in Enron's carefully crafted story, a signal that the truth might eventually come to light. But could a single voice change the course of a corporation this powerful? Or would Enron's machine continue unchecked until it was too late? As cracks in Enron's empire widened, the company's board took an unprecedented step, hiring law professor William Powers to conduct an internal investigation. Powers was thorough, digging into Enron's financial practices with a team of experts. What they uncovered was more than just questionable accounting. It was a masterclass in deception orchestrated by Enron's top executives. The findings were staggering. Powers revealed that Enron had used off the books partnerships to hide billions in debt. These schemes, largely masterminded by CFO Andrew Fastow, allowed the company to inflate its profits while concealing its crippling liabilities. Through these hidden transactions, Enron executives had crafted a facade of financial health, deceiving not only investors but also their own employees. The Powers Report painted a picture of systematic corruption, a corporate culture where deception was normalized and where executives prioritized personal gain over ethical responsibility. As Powers presented his findings, shockwaves rippled through the corporate world, and Enron's glittering image began to crumble publicly. But despite the explosive revelations, questions lingered. Would these findings come soon enough to save the company and hold the architects of this fraud accountable? Or was Enron already too far gone, with consequences that couldn't be contained? As Powers presented his damning report, the world waited to see if justice would catch up with Enron's top brass, or if they'd find a way to escape. To maintain its dazzling image of financial strength, Enron relied on a web of special purpose entities SPEs. These financial structures, designed and controlled by CFO Andrew Fastow, served a singular purpose: to keep Enron's mounting debt hidden from view. By shifting liabilities to these off the books partnerships, Enron created the illusion of a company flush with cash and free from the burden of debt. It was a carefully crafted deception, one that Fastow managed with an eye for secrecy and manipulation. Here's how it worked. Fastow and his team created shell companies, which they presented as separate entities, but in reality were tightly controlled by Enron. Through these SPEs, Enron could shuffle debt out of sight, as if sweeping it under an invisible rug. In exchange, the SPEs received inflated assets or even Enron stock, boosting Enron's apparent worth. This system masked the company's financial instability from investors and analysts, allowing Enron to keep up appearances as a corporate powerhouse. But these schemes were dangerously unstable, relying on Enron's constantly rising stock value to stay afloat. If the stock dropped, the balance sheets would fall apart, revealing the hidden debts that Enron had tried so hard to conceal. Fastow's SPEs were like time bombs set to detonate, threatening to expose the company's deceit if even a single variable changed. As Enron's stock wavered, these hidden debts loomed ever closer to the surface. How much longer could Enron keep up this game? The SPEs were the ticking clock in Enron's financial maze, and as the company's control over its image began to slip, the truth lay just one misstep away from eruption. Enron's financial reports were a masterpiece of deception, dazzling investors and analysts alike. They were filled with impressive looking numbers, intricate charts, and complex financial jargon. But beneath the surface, this complexity served a purpose far beyond transparency. It was a calculated smokescreen. The convoluted layers of Enron's financial statements masked a growing mountain of debt and failing investments, keeping even the sharpest financial analysts in the dark. Each report presented Enron as a highly profitable powerhouse, boasting revenues that seemed to defy industry norms. But it wasn't that simple. These profits were built on creative accounting and hypothetical earnings from deals that hadn't yet, and often never would, pay off. Through mark to market accounting, speculative gains were recorded as current revenue, creating an illusion of continuous success. This smoke and mirrors approach was no accident. It was a carefully orchestrated facade. Few outside Enron could make sense of the labyrinthine structure of SPEs, revenue projections, and off the books liabilities that lay hidden within the reports. By layering these complexities, Enron ensured that only a handful of insiders knew the full picture, allowing them to control the narrative while pushing risks out of public view. Yet, as Enron's foundation became increasingly fragile, the weight of these hidden debts was impossible to ignore. The brilliance of the numbers would soon begin to fade, leaving behind only questions. Could anyone unravel Enron's financial puzzle before it all came crashing down? Enron wasn't just another company on Wall Street. It was a star, a darling of major investors and financial analysts. Despite whispers of instability, Wall Street's admiration for Enron seemed unwavering. This loyalty didn't come by accident. It was meticulously cultivated by Enron's charismatic leaders, who knew precisely how to sell the story of endless growth and unparalleled innovation. Executives like Ken Lay and Jeffrey Skilling were masters at charm, crafting an aura of infallibility around Enron. Every press release, investor meeting, and financial projection painted the company as a visionary force, tapping into new markets with unmatched potential. Skilling's aggressive approach to growth and innovation promised returns that kept investors spellbound, while Lay's affable reputation reassured them that the company was in trustworthy hands. The combined effect was a powerful allure, one that turned skepticism into blind faith. For Wall Street, Enron was a phenomenon, the stock that couldn't fail. Investors looked past signs of trouble, believing that any concerns were temporary obstacles for a company this extraordinary. And so, Enron's stock continued to climb, driven by faith rather than fact. The market wanted to believe in the vision of endless profits, in the charismatic leaders who promised the moon. But as Enron's web of financial trickery grew, this loyalty would soon prove to be a devastating trap. Wall Street's love affair with Enron was, in many ways, a tale of seduction and betrayal. Would investors see the truth before it was too late, Or had Enron's spellbound audience fallen too deeply under its sway? In every scandal, there are enablers, those who turn a blind eye when it matters most. For Enron, that enabler was Arthur Andersen, one of the largest and most respected accounting firms in the world. Arthur Andersen wasn't just Enron's auditor, it was also a consultant, deeply embedded within Enron's operations, collecting lucrative fees for both roles. The firm was supposed to keep Enron in check, providing unbiased oversight and ensuring the company's financials were honest. But the reality was far from that. With millions in fees at stake, Arthur Andersen's independence became compromised. Enron was one of its biggest clients, and the relationship wasn't just financial, it was personal. High level executives at Andersen were closely aligned with Enron's leadership, creating a conflict of interest that led to a dangerous level of complacency. Warning signs were overlooked, suspicious accounting methods were approved without question, and as Fastow's complex SPE schemes unfolded, Anderson did little to scrutinize or challenge the practices. This lack of oversight didn't go unnoticed by those within Enron who knew of Anderson's obligations. The executives counted on this leniency, confident that Anderson would keep their secrets and even help mask the company's unstable financial health. Anderson's blind eye provided Enron with the cover. It needed to push its deception even further, amplifying the risk and scale of the inevitable collapse. But when the scandal eventually broke, the firm's ties to Enron would lead to its own ruin. Arthur Andersen's legacy as a top accounting firm would be reduced to a cautionary tale of the dangers that come when trust is sacrificed for profit. By 2001, the intricate house of cards Enron had built was starting to sway. Behind the scenes, the company's financial situation was far more dire than anyone outside the upper echelons knew. Enron's tangled web of debt and speculative accounting could only hold up if everything went perfectly. But reality was catching up, and the warning signs were becoming impossible to ignore. As cracks widened, investors began to grow wary. Rumors circulated about Enron's opaque finances and suspicious partnerships. Market confidence started slipping, and as confidence fell, so did Enron's stock. Investors who had once believed in the company's golden image now found themselves gripped by fear, watching helplessly as Enron's value plunged. Executives scrambled to calm the storm, issuing reassurances that the company was strong, even as they themselves began selling off their shares in secret. Inside the company, panic took hold. Enron's leaders knew that if investors pulled out en masse, the empire would fall. Executives rushed to patch the leaks, urging analysts and shareholders to stay the course. They insisted that the slump was temporary, that Enron's foundation was sound. But the numbers told a different story, and no amount of spin could erase the mounting debt that loomed behind the scenes. The empire was crumbling from within. What had started as whispers of doubt had grown into full-blown panic. Enron's dazzling facade was breaking apart, and as it wobbled, the truth lay just one revelation away from bursting into the open. The fall was imminent, and everyone inside and outside the company was about to see just how fragile Enron's success truly was. The news hit like a bombshell. Enron was teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. In an instant, the dazzling image of prosperity shattered, replaced by shock and disbelief. Investors who once saw Enron as a beacon of growth now faced a brutal reality. The company, once among the top in the nation, was crumbling under the weight of its hidden debts, and there was no way to save it. As the revelation spread, Enron's stock plummeted, dragging billions of dollars in personal wealth down with it. For employees, the news was devastating. Enron had promoted a culture where loyalty to the company felt like loyalty to a family. Many had invested their entire life savings and retirement funds in Enron stock, trusting that the company's strength would support them in return. But now their pensions evaporated, leaving them with nothing. Public shock turned into anger as thousands of people realized they had been deceived by the very company they trusted. The ripple effect spread quickly. Media outlets and financial analysts scrambled to piece together the story, dissecting how a seemingly unstoppable corporate giant had managed to conceal its weaknesses for so long. Questions arose. How had regulators missed the signs? How had Wall Street been so blinded by Enron's allure? And who, exactly, would be held accountable for the ruin Enron had left in its wake? In the coming days, the headlines would tell the story of an empire built on lies, but the consequences were only just beginning. Enron's fall would set off a chain reaction, reaching far beyond its Houston headquarters, as the world demanded answers and justice. The scandal drew the attention of federal authorities, and the FBI, along with the Securities and Exchange Commission SEC, moved quickly to investigate Enron. This wasn't just any inquiry, it became one of the most extensive and complex white collar investigations in US history. The scale of Enron's financial deception demanded an unprecedented level of scrutiny. Special teams of investigators, prosecutors, and forensic analysts were mobilized, all tasked with untangling Enron's financial labyrinth. The operation was monumental. Authorities collected more than 500 boxes of evidence, each one filled with documents that traced Enron's financial transactions, complex accounting methods, and the intricate web of special purpose entities that CFO Andrew Fastow had used to hide debt. Investigators pored over internal emails, accounting files, and legal documents, searching for clues that would reveal how such a massive fraud had been perpetrated. Specialized forensic teams were called in to analyze the computers and digital records of Enron's employees, uncovering emails that pointed directly to the top executives' involvement in the scheme. The deeper investigators dug, the more the scope of Enron's deception became clear. They uncovered evidence of intentional misrepresentation, off the books deals, and financial structures so convoluted that they seemed designed to confuse even the most experienced analysts. The FBI and SEC were now in a race against time, tasked with not only piecing together Enron's complex puzzle, but also holding accountable those responsible for the financial ruin that had spread across the country. This was only the beginning of what would become a long and arduous legal battle, a fight to bring justice to the thousands of employees and investors who had lost everything. But with each piece of evidence collected, the path to exposing Enron's truth became clearer as the empire's secrets slowly came to light. As Enron's empire collapsed, all eyes turned to the trial of Ken Lay and Jeffrey Skilling, charged with conspiracy and fraud. The prosecution painted them as architects of deception, masterminds who had orchestrated a series of lies to inflate Enron's value while hiding its debts. Both men pleaded not guilty, with Skilling especially adamant in his defense, insisting he was innocent despite mounting evidence. His unwavering stance added tension to the courtroom as jurors sat riveted by each new revelation of financial manipulation and corruption. In chilling detail, the prosecution presented evidence of how Skilling had pushed Enron's aggressive mark-to-market accounting and approved the use of special purpose entities to mask debt. The public watched as Skilling, once seen as an industry visionary, defended his choices. But with every witness and piece of evidence, the court saw glimpses of a company that had been built on lies, with leaders who had prioritized their own fortunes over the livelihoods of their employees and the trust of their investors. In a dramatic twist, CFO Andrew Fastow, once the man behind Enron's financial architecture, became the prosecution's star witness. Facing his own criminal charges, Fastow struck a plea deal in exchange for his cooperation. His testimony revealed the extent of the manipulation and fraud, exposing how he had crafted deals and entities to hide Enron's financial troubles. With meticulous detail, Fastow recounted how he and other executives had created a false narrative of endless profitability, one that enriched top executives even as it buried Enron under insurmountable debt. Fastow's insider perspective was a game changer, transforming the trial. He outlined the web of lies that had propped up Enron's stock value, sharing documents, emails, and personal accounts that implicated Skilling and Lay directly. His testimony was a turning point, laying bare the calculated deceit that had brought Enron from revered success to catastrophic failure. For the jurors and the public, Fastow's words exposed the true depth of Enron's betrayal, a tale of greed and arrogance that shattered lives and redefined corporate accountability. Behind the staggering numbers and high-profile trial, the Enron scandal left a trail of personal devastation. Thousands of employees who had trusted their careers and savings to the company watched their life's work evaporate in an instant. Enron had encouraged its employees to invest heavily in company stock, building up retirement funds and pensions tied directly to Enron's success. When the company collapsed, these pensions disappeared, leaving employees with nothing to show for years of service. One poignant story involved a middle-aged Enron employee who had poured her savings into Enron stock, following company advice and betting on the company's future. She planned to retire comfortably, but when the company imploded, her retirement fund was gone, leaving her facing an uncertain future. Families who had relied on Enron's stability found themselves on the brink of financial ruin, forced to start over. For the public, the scandal wasn't just about corporate fraud. It was a tragic example of how corporate greed can ruin ordinary lives. These personal stories brought an emotional depth to the trial, reminding everyone of the real impact behind the numbers. As the trial continued, one of Enron's most deceptive practices came under the spotlight: mark-to-market accounting. This method, championed by Jeffrey Skilling, allowed Enron to project future profits on long-term deals as immediate revenue. Even if a deal wouldn't turn profitable for years or might never be profitable at all, the company could book the projected earnings up front, inflating its revenue on paper. To investors, this painted Enron as an unstoppable force, but behind the scenes, it was a dangerous game built on hypothetical numbers. The court heard how Skilling and other executives used this accounting trick to cover up mounting losses. By recording speculative revenue, they created the illusion of growth, fooling analysts and investors into thinking Enron was thriving. But as the projections didn't match reality, this strategy created a massive financial gap that no amount of manipulation could close. The revelations shocked even seasoned analysts, exposing how Enron's leadership had prioritized maintaining the company's image over facing financial truths. The deceptive use of mark-to-market accounting became a symbol of the scandal, a stark example of how greed had led Enron down a path of destruction. Enron's collapse didn't just devastate its own employees and investors. It took down one of the world's largest and most respected accounting firms with it. Arthur Andersen, the firm responsible for auditing Enron's financials, found itself under intense scrutiny as details of its complicity came to light. Not only had Andersen approved Enron's misleading financial statements, but it had also allegedly destroyed evidence when the scandal began to unfold, shredding crucial documents that might have exposed the truth earlier. The firm's deep ties with Enron had compromised its role as an independent auditor, leading to serious ethical breaches. Anderson's downfall was swift, with the firm ultimately convicted of obstruction of justice, a verdict that led to its implosion and the loss of thousands of jobs. The fall of Arthur Anderson became a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power, conflicts of interest, and the consequences of placing profit over integrity. Together, Enron and Anderson's fates were now forever intertwined, each one pulling the other into financial and moral ruin. As Enron's trial pressed on, Ken Lay took a calculated defense, claiming he hadn't known about the depth of the fraud taking place under his leadership. Lay insisted he had trusted his executives and hadn't been involved in the deceptive financial practices that ultimately brought down the company. But prosecutors had a different story to tell. They argued that Lay not only knew, but actively participated in the reckless culture that pushed Enron to prioritize stock prices over ethical responsibility. In court, Lay's attempts to distance himself from the scandal came off as evasive, and the jury struggled to believe that the company's founder could be so oblivious to what was happening within his own organization. The prosecution painted Lay as a figure who had failed to uphold his responsibilities, a leader who, even if not directly involved in every scheme, had fostered an environment where such practices could flourish. For the jury, Lay's defense rang hollow, a final attempt to escape accountability, and a symbol of the reckless ambition that had driven Enron from triumph to tragedy. The Enron trial concluded with sentences that marked a harsh end to a once powerful empire. Jeffrey Skilling, whose strategies and financial maneuvers drove Enron's growth, and its ruin, was convicted of multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy. He faced a hefty prison sentence, becoming a public symbol of corporate greed gone unchecked. Meanwhile, Ken Lay, Enron's founder, was convicted but passed away before he could serve his time, leaving a sense of unresolved justice. Andrew Fastow, the mastermind behind the labyrinthine financial schemes, managed to secure a reduced sentence in exchange for his cooperation, sharing insights that helped seal the case against his former colleagues. Yet, as the dust settled, many questions remained. Could Enron have been stopped earlier? Were there others who knew and stayed silent? The sentences offered closure, but couldn't erase the devastation left in Enron's wake. Families who had lost their life savings and employees who saw their futures wiped out were left to pick up the pieces, haunted by the scale of betrayal. Enron's downfall didn't just change the lives of those directly affected. It sparked a transformation in corporate governance and accountability across the country. The scandal led to the creation of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, a sweeping reform aimed at preventing future corporate fraud by imposing stricter regulations and increasing transparency in financial reporting. This legislation introduced measures to protect investors, enforced CEO accountability, and set standards for auditing to prevent conflicts of interest like those that compromised Arthur Anderson. The Enron scandal became a cautionary tale, a constant reminder in business schools, boardrooms, and legal circles of what can happen when ethical standards are cast aside in pursuit of profit. It reshaped corporate America's approach to governance, inspiring tighter scrutiny, more transparent practices, and a growing demand for companies to prioritize integrity over earnings. The story of Enron is a stark reminder of the dangers lurking when corporate ambition turns into unchecked greed. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Crime Pulse Stories for more in-depth true crime tales that explore the mysteries behind corporate corruption, criminal minds, and unsolved mysteries. Let's keep the conversation going about ethics, transparency, and the true cost of ambition. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.